On this episode of Common Cosmos Explains It All, we're going to talk about the Pathfinder Adventure Card Game. The card game came out in 2016. Rise of the Runelords was first. Then you had Skull and Shackles. Then you had Wrath of the Righteous. Then you had Mummy's Mask. And then you have the new core set, which comes with a 3 adventure campaign based on Dragon's Demand and its adventure path, Curse of the Crimson Throne. Each one is based on an adventure path, which is what Paizo calls their campaigns. Rise of the Runelords was one of their classic ones before Paizo really had Pathfinder as a game system. Kind of their flagship environment and bosses and monsters and stuff. Skull and Shackles was a pirate-themed one. Wrath of the Righteous was based on the world wound and paladins fighting demons. Mummy's Mask is very Indiana Jones exploring Osirisan, which is, of course, ancient Egypt themed. And I already mentioned Dragon's Demand, which was a module. And then Curse of the Crimson Throne was also one of their most popular adventure paths. There's the playmat. You can get character decks. These are special Pathfinder themed deck boxes from Ultra Pro to keep them in. Each adventure path has a series of adventures in it, which have usually 4, 5, 6 scenarios. So the scenario is what you would actually play a night with your friends. You'd play 1 or 2 scenarios. You wouldn't sit down and play the entire 6-deck adventure path in one go. There's also an organized play component to this. I played both seasons of the ones based on Mummy's Mask, and we are currently playing the season 6 that's based on the new core set. I've played about half of the Runelord set with a home group. I haven't played any of the actual story in the box here from Mummy's Mask, and I hope to be able to do Crimson Throne soon. So I'm going to show you kind of each one and kind of go over the differences. Runelords, as I mentioned, was the first one. So when you open the box, of course this one I've got all set up and playing. It has these adventure decks. When you walk into the game store, you would see this big box on a shelf, sitting there on a shelf, and then next to it you would have all these little boxes hanging, out there as well. Then the character decks, which I don't have one of the original boxes, but they look like this, but they got, a witch on it or a fighter or whatever. These original series, they came with this nice plastic insert to keep all the cards organized. And as you can see, I have them all sleeved. And there's different kinds of cards, and it's probably easier to explain those based off the mat. So you'll have the adventure, the scenario, a location, and then within that location are monsters, items, spells, allies, the 2 types of cards predominantly. You have boons and you have banes. Obviously, a bandit is a bane. That's a monster that you're going to have to fight. Whereas an item that you're going to win would be a boon. A sword is a boon. A spell is a boon. The game is also set up around, you have a blessings deck, or in the new version it's called the Hourglass. Most games you have 30 cards here. So player's turn, they flip a card, that's a turn. They do all their stuff, goes to the next person, they flip a card. So you have 30 turns to complete the game. The game is mostly balanced best around 3 to 4 players. That gives you 10 turns or so a piece to be able to do your stuff. Usually you don't have to worry too much about running out of time. You have 5 or 6 players, you have 6 players out of 30 turns, now you only have 5 turns per player. So if you're not able to explore a lot and burn through that deck, you can run out of time. My first group playing this, we had 6 and I think sometimes 7 players, and we were always down to the very last card, or we'd flat out run out of time and the game ends, and we'd have to do it again. So 3 to 4 players seem to be best. You can solo these games. Normally when you solo them, it's 1 player and you're running 1, 2, 3, 4 characters. There are people who have pulled off, I know Runelords especially, people have actually played it with 1 character. It'd be very challenging because in order to close out locations, defeat traps, fight monsters, you need different skills. I like to describe this game as Pathfinder RPG Light. Obviously all the art is right out of the books. All the items, the gods, the characters that you play as are all in the role-playing game, and it's obviously based on a specific campaign. So if you play that campaign, you'll see those same items, monsters, locations come up. You roll dice just like you do in the RPG. So you would have your sword. You reveal this card to roll your strength ability, your melee ability. So that's a particular die. Then the longsword gives you another D8, and you roll that. Cool about this is the characters level up just like they do in the role-playing game. So you'll get bonuses to your skills. You'll get extra feats and abilities that will apply into those turns. So after a while, you get 2 or 3 adventures into this, and you're starting to roll 5, 6 dice at a time, and it's just like playing the role-playing game. It's just a lot easier to set up, and an average card game takes about 90 minutes for an experienced group, 2 hours to go through. So I like it. If you really like the Pathfinder role-playing game, this is a good way to kind of scratch that itch. You might be wondering, why are there 4 base sets of the old style? Each game is essentially its own little universe. Rune Lords was the first. Some say it's the easiest. Then you had Skull and Shackles, which had a pirate theme, and it added a mechanic of a ship that would move the party around, and it was kind of an extra thing you had to take care of, and it was kind of like a character in that it kind of leveled up and had its own abilities and de-abilities for the party, things like that. I didn't play it a whole lot. I'm not really into pirates. I'm more a ninja guy, so I didn't really get into it as much. Wrath of the Righteous, a lot of people say it's the hardest, and it introduced the cohort mechanic, which is important because a lot of these show up in the character decks. Like if you want to be a witch, you have a familiar. The familiar is your cohort, so you kind of have to know how those rules work. They put all the rules in there, but sometimes you have to refer to the rule set for Wrath of the Righteous to see how that worked. Or if you wanted to run a ship in some of the scenarios in organized play, you'd have to look up the rules for those ships in the Skull and Shackle rules. All the rules are available at Paizo's website. Mummy's Mask I got it all on clearance because these older sets you can get pretty cheap now. You get your first box set home and you take the cover off. You've got the rule book, nice full color rule book, and as I said, you can download this off Paizo's website. And it's got all their typical quality that they put in there, and it's even got in the back, it should have example decks to build to get you started. Has a quick start guide. It'll have a pack that's all set up with your scenario to start with in the get started guide. So if you've never played it before, I recommend, don't just open everything and sort it out. Do what it says, open me first, play that. These are location cards. These are some of the other cards that are in there. And here you can also kind of see the tray, how it looks. It's kind of hard to see with the black light, but there you go. Also, if you're going to play more than 4 characters, or you're just a completionist, or you want the character add-on deck, normally the game's set up, like I said, for 4 players. You get this, it allows you to run up to 6 players. It gives you 4 more characters. All the games do that. And they even include a basic set of dice. It does not have a D20. It's kind of funny. Nothing in the game uses a D20, which is kind of funny since Pathfinder is based on the 3X rules, which of course are based on the open source D20 rule set, and it doesn't even include a D20. Rune Lords was a base set. Then you had the ships in Skull and Shackles. You had cohorts in Wrath of the Righteous. Mummy's Mask added a lot of triggers and traps and trap types and conditions and things like that. It had a pretty profound effect on how you explore locations, because now, it used to be you could explore a location, look and go, oh, that's a big bad, I don't want to fight him right now, or oh, that's a trap, we want to make sure we get the rogue over here to take care of that. Well, Mummy's Mask now, when you explore, there's a chance you'll flip that card over, it'll have literally the word trigger on it, oh, and you set off the trap, now you have to deal with it. So usually you explore at the end of your turn, so you've already burned through a lot of cards and spells, and you might even be beat up. You really have to think, do I want to risk exploring this location, and then I'm going to pop something that I have to engage? So that brings us up to the core set. They were going to do a new version of the card game, kind of to keep up with Pathfinder 2 that was announced last year. So they updated the art, and they wanted to tighten up the math and everything on this. One of the biggest things you'll notice right off the bat is the box is significantly smaller by, I can set this on top and you can see my camera work today is awesome. Anyways, it's hard to tell, but The new box is actually about 1.5 inches taller, but it's a third less as tall here, and it's not nearly as wide. If we set this right here actually I'm going to set it up here, and you should be able to see it. So you can see Mummy's mask here all around it. So it's a lot smaller box. It's heavier because it's so much more compact. The other big change they did, instead of releasing the adventure path in one deck at a time every other month, they just released it all at once in its own pretty box. So when this launched, and this launched, boom, and that was last May. Which is kind of nice. This game, and again, I've got it all set up, so they changed the interior as well. To reduce the size, it does not have that fancy tray to keep everything sorted. It came with cardboard dividers, and they included these foam blocks. You can put, as I've demonstrated, you can put the entire core set and Crimson Throne in here. I've got them sleeved. They made it fit sleeves, because that was a complaint on the old versions, was when it's fully sleeved it's really tight, doesn't really fit in there perfectly well, and especially if you play it a lot or you play in society play, you want to sleeve your cards. Now the new core game here, let me grab a monster. The new core game, as you can see, they've changed the art a lot, but importantly the back of the card art is the exact same as the old versions. Obviously there's some printing differences, so you can kind of see that, oh, that's a little bit darker, a little bit lighter, whatever. But again, if you sleeve your cards, it doesn't matter because they're all there. Now, the new core set is backwards compatible with all the others, and is compatible with all the character decks. You'll obviously have the different card fronts when you pull your card. The art's a lot different, the layout is different. Some people don't care, some people do. I've seen it a lot in society. You have that mixed deck in your hand. It's kind of funky. And voila, the rule book. It also did the thing where it had a little open me first pack of cards, and it had the quick start guide on how to do it. There's also a conversion guide available for like the older class decks, things like that. Again, it's a full color book. Ask at your local gaming store, because a lot of times I'll have a society group there that plays on Tuesday nights or whatever. Speaking for the community, we will gladly show you how to play the game, loan you a character deck, all that stuff, so you can see how to play the game in person with experienced players. If that's not available, there's lots of plays out there. I'll even throw up a couple links here from some games that I streamed during a virtual convention using TableTop Simulator, so you can kind of see the flow of this particular game there. It came with pawns, so you can put the pawn on your location. The old version, you would just lay your card down. Sometimes the card would get mixed up with the deck. So they added pawns. And like I said, the thing on this one was they tightened up the math. As I said, they changed the blessings to being an hourglass. And the blessings now will have, before they always had an effect, but it was really easy to forget them, and you kind of had to know them in your head. But here, of course, I grab one and that doesn't, but it says, when this is the hour, and then it has an effect listed. And that's separate from the powers on the card if it's in your hand. So, but a lot of times it might be like, during this turn, get a +1 versus undead. Or during this turn, when you bless, you get to roll 2 dice instead of 1. Normally when you bless, you get 1 bonus die. Maybe they'll let you add 2. There's some that aren't nice. There will be some that are, this turn when you fight a monster, fight it twice. Ugh. Also, in Curse of the Crimson Throne, they added in the Hero deck to be used as blessings in the hour, which is really cool. This is the storybook that came with the book Dragon's Demand there. And all it does is it goes in and it tells you, it gives you a lot more story, because the original version, all the story was on the card. So you'd only have 2 or 3 lines, Here you can actually have the story all spelled out. It gives you the locations based on how many players you have. If there's only 1 player, you only set up a couple of locations. If you have 4, you come down here and you set up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 locations. Those are the names of the cards. And then on the card, let's just show you here. Then on the card, it will tell you over here, here's all the different kinds of cards: monster, barrier, weapon, spell, armor, and how many of them based on the size of the location. That was something that they added also in core to be able to allow groups to change the difficulty and or the time, because the original game was a medium-sized deck, which meant there was 10 cards, I think. So now you can have a small deck which has less cards in it, so better for maybe a smaller group, like if it is only 1 or 2 people playing. Or if you do have those big monster groups, you can step it up to large. Or if you do have a smaller group but you're really good, you've been playing a long time, you know the game really well, throw in those larges. So they added a little bit of difficulty adjustment that way. Here's one of the society ones. It's the same format, the exact same format. It gives you the story, the locations to build out. What I like about society scenarios is they will play around with, especially in Rune Lords, it was you have to close each location. Each location will have a henchman. You engage him. When you defeat him, you close the location with some checks, and eventually you find the villain, the main bad guy, and when you defeat him, game's over and you win. And like in Rune Lords, that's all you do over and over and over and over. It gets a little dull after a while. So that's why they started introducing the other mechanics. And then society play has always been good about, we're going to add this new way of doing something. So there's all kinds. There's still that. There's tank and spanks, where it's just, that's all you got to do, just cruise through there. Or there's somewhere where they'll make the party stick together and you have to go through the locations in this order. Like maybe you're in a prison and you're trying to get your way out. Or there's no villains at all. Maybe you have to acquire a certain amount of allies or a certain type of items. We've had some of those where it's like, oh, every person needs to acquire a blessing or needs to acquire a alchemical item in your hand, and then you can close that location. So they add all kinds of different ways to play the game, which brings me to another point. The game is highly replayable. All of them are. Like I said, you can backwards compatibility, you can mix them all together. The core comes with 12 characters to play through. Most of the others come with 8, I believe. And then you've got all the character decks that are available separately, which I'll show you here shortly. So just replaying with the different characters is crazy. The amount of replay. And of course, obviously, it's a card game, so the locations are going to be random and different. The scenario might be the same, go to this location and get this guy, but each game's going to be different. And then you can always do, and you don't have to be in Pathfinder Society. You can download these. They're usually, the card game ones I think are $4 a piece, $4 or $5 a piece. And you buy this and you download it, and then here's 4 more adventures for this. This is a little standalone. There was a free RPG one where you got to be the goblins. They love their goblins at Paizo. And I think this is 3 scenarios. Yeah, it's 3 scenarios to play, you know. So whatever you want, and you can just play it over and over. This came with rules on how to make your own random encounters, so you can just do whatever kind of theme you want. People have gone so far as you can make your own cards through like drive-through cards, and they'll make their own characters, items, villains, locations, and build their home campaign in the card game. Pretty cool stuff. Last thing here, I'm going to kind of show you a couple examples of society play and the character decks. You'll get those character decks. Like I said, they came in a box similar to what those look like. And it's 110 cards. They'll be labeled in the top corner what deck they were originally. This one was Ultimate Equipment. And it's the same thing. You've got all your items. Obviously, these are all boons. You don't have monsters and stuff in here. All your items, all your weapons, they're all themed around that particular character. So they cover all of the iconics. So if there's a character in there, they have the occult decks. They even have Hell's Vengeance. So if you want to play the bad guy characters, which I'll show, they have those. They've got the Tales. There's 2 decks of Tales characters from the novels. So if there was one of the characters in the novels that you really wanted to, you have a good shot of being able to play them. In all of the hardback books, besides the normal iconics, Ezrin, Kyra, Maricel, you've got the Oracle. Yes, you have the Oracle. You have the occult characters. Not only do you have those well-known iconics, but the examples in the book, some of the other classes that aren't as popular, or there's different witches besides Freya. There's like, because each deck will have 4 characters, 3 or 4 characters in it, depending on the deck. So tons and tons of options. Somebody did it up, because there's 140-ish characters that you can play, and obviously you can build them with the ultimate decks. You can mix and match. And here's the old character card I was telling you about, instead of having the little standee, so you would just lay that down next to it. So here's what I was talking about. You've got your abilities, you got your powers down here. On the back these are the kinds of cards that will go in your deck. how many you can have, and as you can see, you can add to those numbers. And up here is your favorite type, so when you deal out your hand, he has to have an item or a weapon. You start with 15 cards in your deck. You can add to that too as you level up and stuff. You can add to your overall hand size as well. Now, society-wise, you can go out and you can download character sheets. A lot easier to read than those little cards, especially if you have bifocals like me. It's a lot easier when that's laying on the table. You can look over. And then here's an example of a chronicle sheet that if you are playing in society, you just track the scenarios you play, and basically all you're doing is you just track it and you say, yeah, we succeeded, and I took a skill feat or a hand feat or a card feat or whatever you did, and the reward for the scenario, which could be an item, or you get a bonus boon of some kind, or especially in society time, a lot of times you'll see things like throughout the rest of this adventure your character can do +1 on checks against fire-based traps or something like that. So these are the official Pathfinder ones from Ultra Pro. This is a double deck box, so as you can see, you got room to put 2 decks in there, which is pretty handy. My wife got this for me for Christmas, I think, or birthday. But this way I've got it all split up a little bit more, so I've got the different types of cards split out a little bit more. This is actually the Necromancer from Hell's Vengeance. So here's her current deck. She is tier 3. There she is, Nictessa. And yeah, so being a Necromancer, when you defeat a monster, instead of it just going back in the box because it's dead, that monster goes in your hand, and because you're a Necromancer, and you've got spells to summon them, raise them, do things with them. It's pretty fun. It takes her a little bit to kind of get that stuff going in her hands, but very similar to tabletop actually. So that was a very quick and rather disorganized view of Pathfinder Adventure Card Game. If you're interested in it, there's definitely going to be links down below for paizo where you can get some of these. Like I said, the older sets are getting hard to find as they're going out of print, but when you do find them, a lot of times you can get really good 50 to 80% off kind of thing, so you can get the whole game. Normally the box set is 60, and I think this adventure path is 50. I think the old versions, it used to be core was 60, and then each little deck box was $20. So 60, and then there's 6 decks boxes to buy, so 120 bucks initial investment. But like I said, hunt around, you can find it. It's a fun game. Like I said, it's highly replayable. My group that I've been playing for about 2.5 years in society, there's 3 of us, me and 2 other guys, and we just meet on Monday nights at the game store and we'd play a scenario or 2. Tons of replayability, and with it being organized play, you can take your character with your chronicle sheets, you can go to Gen Con, you can go to your local con, you can go to, if you're lucky enough to have a couple groups in town, you don't really want to split up your character like that, bouncing back and forth. Check it out, and like I said, there will be some links to a live stream on TableTop Simulator. So especially right now with all the COVID-19 coronavirus lockdown stuff, you can play it online, and it's then you don't have to shuffle all those decks over and over, and so setup and teardown's really easy with it. Thanks very much. Be sure to like and subscribe, and tell all your friends to come watch Dave ramble about stuff.